If you have ever played support in League of Legends, then you're probably a little familiar with the concept of roaming. At its core, roaming essentially boils down to moving around the map while attempting to get vision around objectives, scouting for the enemy jungler, helping out an ally laner, or looking to catch out and pick off an enemy. However, roaming is not nearly as simple as that, and instead it can be quite the complex task. What's going on, Nasty Nation? It's Nasty, and in today's video, I'm going to be covering a highly requested topic, and that is how to properly roam as support in League of Legends. This guide is going to cover when the best times to roam are, what champions you should prioritize roaming with, the importance of roaming, how to properly roam, what paths you should take when roaming, and many more things. I hope you're excited for it, and if you are, be sure to hit that like button, and without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so the first aspect of roaming that needs to be understood is the importance of roaming. The thing is, it's insanely difficult to have a strong impact in solo queue games from the support role, simply because the role lacks a lot of the carry potential that other roles have. For example, while other roles can rely on putting out massive amounts of damage in order to carry games, supports are often left at the bottom of the damage charts, unless of course you're playing one of the few support champions who can dish out a lot of damage, such as Zyra or Brand. While other roles can rely on outplaying their opponents 1v2 or 1v3 as a way to extend leads for their team, supports are typically team reliant and will need at the very least one teammate to follow up on their plays in order to accomplish anything. While other roles can rely on farming for gold income, supports are forced to either make plays or fall back on their support items for gold income, which more times than not is not nearly enough to keep up with the rest of their team. The list of setbacks that supports are forced to deal with can truly go on and on, but I think you're getting to the point. The fact is, supports typically struggle to carry games, so we then have to look for other options to have a larger impact and influence on the game. That's where roaming comes into play. Roaming is so very important because it's going to be the most efficient way for supports to have a larger impact on the game and thus have a better chance of carrying. Obviously, it's not the only way for supports to carry, considering shot calling, playmaking, and peeling are just a few factors of many that can also come into play and make a difference, but trust me when I say that roaming is the most effective form of carrying games from the support role, and understanding that importance is the first step. Now that we've established the importance of roaming, let's talk about the best times to roam. To make things simple, I've narrowed it down to 3 main occasions, but just know it's not always this crystal clear. With that being said though, the 3 best times to roam are when your ADC is either dead or not in lane, your ADC has a safe and secure freeze in lane, and any time you are leaving the fountain. Let's break these down one by one, starting with roaming if your ADC is either dead or not in lane. The reasoning for roaming at this time is actually quite simple, and the reasoning for that is, if your ADC is either dead or not in lane, then there's no reason for you to be in lane either. For example, this means that even if there is a huge wave bottom, if your ADC isn't there, then you probably shouldn't be there either. Although farming and soaking up experience is important in the big picture of League of Legends, those kind of things just aren't all that valuable for the support role, and instead you can use that time to be more productive elsewhere on the map by roaming and looking to make plays. Next up, we have roaming while your ADC has a safe and secure freeze in lane, and the same concept applies here. If your ADC is trying to freeze and farm up, then that's perfectly fine, but if that is the case, then there's no need to be sitting in the lane, standing next to him doing nothing. You're not accomplishing anything by doing that aside from stealing some experience. So once again, there's other things that you could be doing that are more productive, so roam around the map and look to make things happen instead of standing around your ADC. One thing I would like to emphasize on here though is understanding what exactly a safe and secure freeze is. I would say that as long as you have vision of the enemy team and you have some wards placed for your ADC, that should be safe and secure, and thus you should feel free to roam around the map. If that isn't the case though, you'll probably just want to stick with your ADC because you don't want to roam if your ADC has any threat of being dove or killed off. So again, if you have vision of the enemy or you have good vision of the surrounding area around your ADC, then chances are it's safe and secure and you're good to roam. The last scenario in which you want to roam is whenever you are leaving the fountain. Now this can happen on multiple occasions, whether that be because you died and respawned, or because you just recalled from lane, or maybe you just walked back to the fountain after forgetting to buy items. My point is, if you find yourself in the fountain in the first 20 minutes or so of the game, it's generally a good idea to roam. And by the way, the reason I limit that to the first 20 minutes is because typically after that point in the game, you're going to be grouping with your team for the most part rather than roaming, but let's just get back on topic now that we've cleared that up. So what I see most support players doing when leaving the fountain is taking this path here straight down the bot lane, but That's not actually what you want to be doing. Instead, take this path here through your jungle and towards the river. By doing so, you're going to be giving yourself multiple options rather than limiting yourself to returning back to the bot lane. For example, from here you have the option to roam mid and look for a pick, attempt to take dragon with your jungler, place some wards for deep vision, or invade the enemy jungle with your jungler. At the bare minimum, you might decide that there's nothing to do and just return back to the bot lane, but at least by taking this route, you're giving yourself options. If you don't take this route and instead you head straight back to the bot lane, then you're limiting yourself to what options there are, and thus limiting yourself to what plays are available. It's always wiser when leaving the fountain to take a path that will give you multiple choices rather than limiting yourself. So again, take this path through the jungle and into the river rather than going straight to the bot lane, and you very may well be surprised by just how much you might be able to accomplish. Next up, let's talk about which champions you should prioritize roaming with. A very easy way of telling if you're playing a champion that should prioritize roaming is by asking yourself the question, does this champion buy mobility boots? If they do, then chances are they are a champion fit for roaming. You ask this question because mobility boots often synergize well with champions who are effective roamers, so you can get a pretty straightforward answer just by asking yourself that question. And just on a quick little side note, if you're unaware of whether or not the champion you're playing should buy mobility boots or not, then I would definitely check out one of my more recent videos in which I show the best possible build and rune page for each and every support champion. There should be a card in the top right corner of your screen right now that should link to that video. But yeah, if you need help figuring out what you should be building and if mobility boots are part of that build, then be sure to check out that video. If that still wasn't enough though, I've gone ahead and put together a little graph that explains it a little more clear. On the left hand side here, we have the champions who absolutely need to roam. These are the champions that frequently buy mobility boots and have playstyles that enhance and encourage roaming. In the middle here, we have the champions who can prioritize roaming. These champions are not necessarily super oppressive threats when it comes to roaming, but they can surely get the job done. Mobility boots are an option on these champions, but they aren't necessarily a necessity. Finally, on the right hand side, we have the champions who shouldn't prioritize roaming. In one way or another, I'm sure they could roam, but it wouldn't be all that effective, so it's better to just put less of an emphasis on it. Obviously, this graph doesn't show every single support, but I hope it was enough to allow you to get the gist of it. The final and most crucial aspect of roaming that I'll touch up on now is how to actually go about with roaming. Now, this is a bit of a tricky subject to cover because each support champion typically approaches roaming differently. For example, if you're roaming as Nami, you're going to want to lead with an auto E, then look to bubble once the enemy is slowed. On the other hand, if you're playing someone like Blitzcrank, you're going to want to use W for the bonus movement speed, run at the enemy threatening a hook, knock them up if you can get in range, then hook, or simply hook them right away if you're not in range to knock them up immediately. As you might already be able to tell, it would be nearly impossible for me to cover how each support champion should approach roaming in such detail. However, I still can share some basics that they all have in common. The first thing that all supports have in common when it comes to roaming is prioritizing the mid lane. Although scouting for the enemy jungler or securing vision among other things are effective, nothing quite compares to roaming to the mid lane and picking up a kill for your mid laner, which is why no matter which support champion you're playing, roaming to the mid lane will always be a priority. Continuing on with the trend of roaming to the mid lane, all supports will generally want to take the same path. Running through the mid lane or from your own jungle is pretty useless and typically won't result in anything beneficial. Instead, pathing through the bush from the river or coming from behind the enemy through their own jungle is more optimal. This allows you to not only narrow the gap between you and the enemy mid laner, but also between you and the tier 1 mid tower. The final aspect of roaming that all supports have in common that I want to cover is the idea of holding off on skill shots. Now this might come off a little complicated, so just try your best to follow with me. When it comes to roaming and trying to pick off an enemy, you don't want to use your skill shots right away. Chances are, if you have the number advantage, the enemy will be looking to run rather than fight. They will be turning their attention towards playing defensively, trying their best to survive, and dodging crucial skill shots. As a result, they might often begin to run side to side, attempting to avoid being hit, rather than running in one direction. If this happens, just continue to damage them without using your skill shot. Eventually, they will be taken too low and be forced to run. Once they have committed to a specific path, then you want to throw out your skill shot. If you get overeager, use your skill shot too soon, and the enemy is able to dodge it, then the roam attempt was a waste, and the enemy will most likely get away. Instead, just be patient, wait for the enemy to commit to a certain path, then hit them when they have nothing left to do. If I didn't explain that clear enough, then be sure to ask me your questions down in the comment section below. In fact, if at any point in this video I didn't explain something clear enough, then feel free to ask in the comments, and I will do my best to get back to you. I read and reply to about 90% of my comments, so don't hesitate to ask. Anyways, that is going to do it for me. I did put a lot of effort into this video, a lot of research went into this video, so if you did enjoy, if you were able to find this helpful, then be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It would mean the world to me. With all that being said though, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.